My wife and her family ignored me for years. At Thanksgiving, I casually mentioned my $160 million fortune. My wife's sister's jaw dropped, and my wife just stared in silence. Complete silence. But let me back up. Let me tell you how a man becomes invisible in his own life. I wasn't always invisible. There was a time, brief, fleeting, when Caroline looked at me like I mattered. When her eyes would find mine across a room and something would spark there, something warm and real. That was 11 years ago, back when we were both 26 and stupid enough to believe that love alone could build a life. I was working as a junior software engineer at a mid-sized tech firm in Seattle. Nothing glamorous. I wore khakis to work and brought leftovers in Tupperware containers. I drove a 7-year-old Honda Civic with a crack in the windshield I kept meaning to fix. By most measures, I was unremarkable. Average. The kind of man who fades into the background of his own story. Caroline was different. Caroline was vibrant. She worked in marketing at a boutique agency downtown, the kind of place where everyone wore expensive casual clothes and talked about brand narratives over oat milk lattes. She had this laugh, God, her laugh. It was like wind chimes on a summer afternoon, light, careless, free. Her family was old Seattle money. Not the flashy kind you see on reality television, but the quiet, insidious kind that seeps into every conversation, every assumption, every unspoken hierarchy. Her father, Robert Ashford, had built a commercial real estate empire across the Pacific Northwest. Her mother, Patricia, sat on the boards of 3 museums and chaired the annual Children's Hospital Gala. Her older sister, Victoria, had married a cardiac surgeon and lived in a sprawling craftsman in Queen Anne with wisteria climbing the front porch. I came from nothing. My father did when I was 7, heart attack, sudden and cruel, the kind of death that leaves a family scrambling. My mother worked double shifts as a nurse to keep our small house in Tacoma. She never remarried, never had time for anything except work and survival. She taught me resilience through her silence, through the way she never complained, never asked for help, never expected the world to be anything other than hard. When I met Caroline at a friend's birthday party, I knew immediately that we came from different worlds. She sparkled. I didn't. But somehow, impossibly, she chose me, or so I thought. The early months were intoxicating. We'd meet after work and walk along the waterfront, watching ferries cut through Puget Sound, talking about everything and nothing. She loved that I was grounded, she said. Real. Not like the trust fund bros she'd dated before, men who measured their worth in gym memberships and their father's quarterly earnings. I was authentic, down to earth, refreshingly simple. I see now what those words really meant. I was poor, manageable, someone who would never challenge the natural order of things. 6 months in, she brought me home to meet her family. The Ashford estate sat on 3 acres in Medina, overlooking Lake Washington. The driveway alone was longer than the street I grew up on. Inside, everything was cream and gold and tasteful, the kind of tasteful that only old money can achieve, where every piece of furniture whispers its own provenance, where even the air feels expensive. Robert shook my hand with the grip of a man who'd crushed lesser men in boardrooms. So you're the engineer, he said, as if the word itself was faintly amusing. Patricia smiled with her mouth, but not her eyes. How nice. Victoria barely looked up from her phone. I was measured that night, weighed, found wanting. But Caroline laughed it off. They're just protective, she said on the drive home, her hand on my knee. They'll warm up to you, you'll see. They never did. We got married 2 years later in a ceremony that cost more than my annual salary. Patricia planned everything with military precision. The venue, a historical mansion in Capitol Hill, the flowers, imported peonies and blush and cream, the photographer, some award-winning artist from New York who shot everything in black and white to capture authentic emotion. I stood at the altar in a rented tuxedo and watched Caroline walk down the aisle in a dress that cost $30,000. She looked like a dream, like something I had no right to touch. My mother sat in the 3rd row on the groom's side, which was notably emptier than the bride's side. She wore a navy dress she'd bought at Nordstrom Rack and clutched her purse in her lap like it might fly away. I caught her eye during the vows. She smiled, but there was sadness there. Worry, maybe, like she could already see how this would end. The reception was held in a glass pavilion overlooking the water. 300 guests. Open bar, a seven-piece band. Robert gave a toast about how his little girl had always been independent, always known her own mind, always chosen her own path. He spoke about Caroline's accomplishments, her spirit and her grace. He mentioned me exactly once, and we welcomed Daniel into our family. Welcome. As if I was being granted entry into an exclusive club, one where I'd always be a provisional member. My best man, Marcus, my college roommate and one of my few real friends, pulled me aside during dinner. "You good, man?" he asked, concern creasing his face. "Yeah," I said. "Why wouldn't I be?" He glanced toward the head table, where Caroline was laughing at something Victoria said, both of them radiant in the candlelight. "Just, this is a lot. This family, this world. Just make sure you don't lose yourself in it." I laughed it off, told him I was fine, told him love was enough. I was wrong. The first year of marriage was fine, good even. We moved into a modest two-bedroom condo in Capitol Hill. Modest by my standards, cramped by hers. I was making $75,000 a year by then. Caroline was making 60. We could afford the mortgage, the utilities, a car payment. We had date nights on Fridays. We talked about having kids someday. We were building a life. But there was always this undercurrent, this sense that I was failing some invisible test. Sunday dinners at the Ashford estate became a weekly tradition. Caroline insisted. "It's important to stay connected to family," she'd say. So every Sunday at 6, we'd drive to Medina and sit at that enormous dining table while Patricia served courses prepared by their part-time chef and Robert held forth on real estate markets, interest rates, zoning laws. I tried to contribute, tried to engage, but my opinions were met with polite nods or gentle corrections. "Well, Daniel, that's an interesting thought, but the reality is far more complex." Or, "You'd understand if you'd grown up around this business." Victoria would talk about her husband's work at the hospital, the new car they'd bought, the vacation they were planning to Tuscany. Caroline would talk about campaigns she was working on, clients she was courting. I would sit there silent, eating herb-crusted salmon and roasted fingerling potatoes, feeling like a piece of furniture. After dinner, the women would retire to the sitting room while Robert would pour scotch in his study and talk to Victoria's husband, James, about investments and opportunities. I wasn't invited to these conversations. I was left to clear dishes or make awkward small talk with Patricia about nothing in particular. "It's just how they are," Caroline would say on the drive home. "Don't take it personally." But how else was I supposed to take it? The second year, things shifted. Small things at first. Caroline started working later, staying out for drinks with colleagues, coming home tired and distant. She stopped asking about my day, stopped reaching for my hand when we watched television, stopped laughing at my jokes. In bed, we became strangers. She'd turn her back to me, pull the covers tight, build a wall of space and silence between us. When I'd try to bridge that gap, reach out, touch her shoulder, whisper her name, she'd murmur something about being exhausted and drift away. I told myself it was just a rough patch. Work stress, life stress. Marriage was hard, everyone said so, you had to work at it. But the truth is simpler than that. The truth is that Caroline was disappearing me. At family gatherings, she'd talk over me, correct me, roll her eyes when I spoke. If I shared a story, she'd cut me off halfway through with something she found more interesting. If I expressed an opinion, she'd dismiss it with a wave of her hand. "Daniel doesn't really understand the industry," she'd say, or "Daniel's not really into these things." Or worst of all, "Daniel's just tired, long week, you know." I became a supporting character in my own marriage. Victoria was worse. She had this way of looking at me, or rather, looking through me, like I was a servant who'd wandered into the wrong room. She'd ask Caroline questions about work, about life, about plans, and physically turn her body away from me as they talked. If I answered a question directed at the table, she'd pause, smile tightly, and redirect the conversation to someone else. "Oh, Daniel, that's nice. Anyway, Caroline, tell me more about the Benson account." Robert barely acknowledged me at all. At Christmas, he'd shake my hand and say, "Good to see you, David." "It's Daniel, sir." Right, Daniel." By year 3, I'd stop correcting him. Patricia was more subtle. She'd ask about my job with this sympathetic tone like I was recovering from an illness. "And how is work going for you, Daniel?" Always that pause before work, as if she couldn't quite remember what I did or why it mattered. The invisibility was complete, total. I was a ghost in my own life, and everyone could see right through me. Except I was seeing something they weren't. What the Ashfords didn't know, what Caroline didn't know, was that I was good at what I did. Really good. That junior engineering position I'd held when Caroline and I met, within 3 years, I'd been promoted twice. I was leading a team of 8 developers, building sophisticated back-end systems for enterprise clients. I understood architecture, scalability, elegant solutions to complex problems. But more than that, I understood something fundamental about the tech industry: timing. In my spare time, those late nights after Caroline had gone to bed without a word, those weekends when she was brunching with Victoria or attending charity events I wasn't invited to, I was working, building, creating. I started with a side project, nothing fancy, a small application that helped e-commerce businesses optimize their checkout flows. I built it in 6 weeks, launched it on a whim, and forgot about it. 3 months later, I had 1,200 users. 6 months after that, 18,000. The subscription model I'd implemented was generating $30,000 a month in revenue. I was running the entire operation alone: customer service, bug fixes, feature updates, all while working my day job and maintaining the facade of my failing marriage. I didn't tell Caroline. I'm not sure why at first. Maybe I wanted to see how big it could get before I shared the news. Maybe I wanted something that was mine alone, untouched by her family's judgment. Maybe I was already protecting myself from the inevitable disappointment in her eyes when she realized I'd succeeded at something without her knowledge or approval. The money went into a separate account. Business expenses, I told myself. Reinvestment. But I wasn't reinvesting, I was building a fortress. By year 4 of our marriage, I'd sold that first application to a larger company for $2 million. I walked away with 1.6 after taxes. I didn't celebrate, didn't tell anyone. I sat in my car in the parking garage of the acquiring company's office, signed the papers, and felt nothing. No, that's not true. I felt vindicated, seen, visible to myself at least, even if I remained invisible to everyone else. I took 800,000 and invested it in index funds, safe and boring. The rest I used to fund my next project. This one was bigger, more ambitious. A SaaS platform for mid-sized manufacturing companies to manage their supply chains more efficiently. I'd identified a gap in the market, a need no one was filling well, and I had the technical skills to fill it. I worked 16-hour days. I'd come home from my day job, eat whatever leftovers were in the fridge, and disappear into the second bedroom we'd converted into an office. Caroline barely noticed. She was busy with her own life, her career, her friends, her family. I was just the furniture that paid half the mortgage. My mother got sick that year. Stage 3 breast cancer. The diagnosis came on a Tuesday, delivered over the phone, while I sat in a conference room pretending to care about quarterly projections. I told Caroline that night over reheated Chinese food. She looked up from her phone, frowned sympathetically, and said, "Oh, honey, I'm sorry, that's really hard." Then she went back to scrolling. No offer to visit my mother, no questions about treatment options, no hand reaching across the table to hold mine, just acknowledgement and dismissal. I drove to Tacoma alone every weekend to sit with my mother through chemotherapy. She was stoic, as always, insisting she was fine, even when she clearly wasn't. We'd sit in those sterile treatment rooms, surrounded by beeping machines and the chemical smell of medicine, and talk about small things: the weather, her garden, a book she was reading. "How's Caroline?" she'd ask sometimes. "She's good, busy with work." My mother would study my face for a moment, her eyes, even dulled by medication, seeing more than I wanted her to see. "And you? Are you good?" "I'm fine, Mom." She'd pat my hand, too weak to press the issue, but I knew she didn't believe me. Caroline came to visit my mother exactly once for 45 minutes, during which she checked her phone 6 times and made small talk about the hospital decor. My mother thanked her for coming. Caroline smiled and said, "Of course, it's no problem at all." It was a problem. Everything about me was becoming a problem. My second platform launched during my mother's 6th month of treatment. I'd poured every spare dollar and every spare hour into it. The code was clean. The user interface was intuitive. The pricing model was aggressive but fair. It took off immediately. Not viral, explosive success, nothing so dramatic, but steady, relentless growth. Month over month, the user base expanded. Manufacturing companies across the Midwest and South were signing up, paying annual subscriptions, referring colleagues. The testimonials flooded in, game-changing. Finally, someone who understands our problems, worth every penny. By month 6, I was generating $70,000 in monthly recurring revenue. By month 12, 200,000. I hired a part-time customer service rep, an offshore development team to handle maintenance, a freelance marketer to manage ads. The business ran itself, and I stayed invisible. At work, I was still the same dependable engineer. At home, I was still the same forgettable husband. At Sunday dinners, I was still the same ghost who passed the dinner rolls and laughed at Robert's jokes about tax codes. But in my bank accounts, small in my investment portfolios, in the Delaware LLC I'd established, there I was someone else entirely. My mother went into remission after 18 months. The oncologist called it remarkable. My mother called it grace. I called it relief, pure, overwhelming, exhaling for the first time relief. I took her to dinner to celebrate just the two of us at a nice steakhouse overlooking the water. She ordered filet mignon and looked at me across the table with tears in her eyes. "You've been so strong through all this," she said. "Taking care of me, working so hard. I'm proud of you, Daniel." I almost told her then. Almost explained that I wasn't just working hard, I was building an empire she couldn't imagine. That her son, the one the Ashfords dismissed, the one Caroline treated like an afterthought, was worth more than all of them combined. But I didn't. The words caught in my throat, tangled up with shame and pride and something I couldn't name. Instead, I just squeezed her hand and said, "I learned from the best." She smiled. My mother always knew how to smile through pain. Caroline and I had been married for 5 years when the acquisition offer came. A private equity firm specializing in industrial tech had been quietly purchasing companies in my space. They wanted my platform. They wanted it badly. The initial offer was $30 million. I was sitting in my office, our second bedroom still, with its IKEA desk and slowly dying succulent, when I read the email. I read it 3 times. Then I read it again. The words didn't change. 30 million. For something I'd built alone. In the margins of a life where no one saw me, I negotiated. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to, because for once, I wanted to be seen as someone worth negotiating with, someone with leverage, someone who mattered. We settled on 42 million, with earnout provisions that could push it to 65 if certain growth targets were met over the next 2 years. I signed the papers on a Thursday afternoon in a law office downtown. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Rachel, who I'd hired specifically because she had no connection to the Ashford family or their social circle, shook my hand afterward and said, "Congratulations, you just changed your life." "Yeah," I said, "I guess I did." I drove home in my 7-year-old Honda Civic. I'd never bothered to upgrade and sat in the parking garage of our building for 20 minutes, staring at nothing. Caroline was home, surprisingly. She was on the couch, laptop open, glass of wine in hand, watching some reality show about rich people doing rich things. "Hey," she said, not looking up. "Did you pick up milk?" "No, sorry." "Ugh, Daniel, I asked you this morning." "I forgot." She sighed, exasperated, and returned to her show. I went to the bedroom, changed into sweatpants, and lay on the bed staring at the ceiling. $42 million. Minus taxes, roughly 26 million in my account, plus the 800,000 from the first exit, which had grown to just over a million with market returns, plus the earnout potential. I was worth $27 million conservatively. More if the earnout paid off. More if my investments continued to perform. And my wife had just sighed at me for forgetting milk. I didn't tell her. Not that night, not the next day, not the next week. I didn't tell anyone. Here's what wealthy people understand that everyone else doesn't. Money isn't about spending. It's about power, options, freedom. I didn't buy a yacht, didn't buy a sports car, didn't buy a mansion or a vacation home, or any of the things people fantasize about when they imagine wealth. I invested carefully, strategically. Diversified across index funds, real estate, emerging markets, a handful of promising startups. I hired a wealth manager, not one of the big names, but a quiet, competent firm that specialized in tech exits, and they built me a portfolio designed for long-term growth and tax efficiency. The earnout targets were aggressive, but the private equity firm knew what they were doing. They scaled my platform rapidly, expanding into new markets, acquiring complementary tools, building an ecosystem. 18 months after the acquisition, they hit every target. The earnout paid in full, 65 million total. After taxes, roughly 40 million in hand. Combined with returns on my existing investments, I was approaching 50 million in net worth. I was 40 years old. I drove a Honda Civic. I worked a 9-to-5 job making 130,000 a year. I had been married for 7 years to a woman who hadn't asked me a meaningful question in months. And I was worth $50 million. But money doesn't solve invisibility. It just makes it more absurd. At Sunday dinners, Robert would pontificate about his latest acquisition, a commercial building in Bellevue, a strip mall in Tacoma, a development project in Kirkland. Victoria would nod along, impressed. Caroline would engage, asking smart questions, demonstrating her understanding of market dynamics and cap rates. I'd sit there silent, thinking, I could buy that building, cash, today, without blinking. But I didn't say anything. Patricia would ask about my little job at the tech company, in that same sympathetic tone. And you're still enjoying the computer work? It's fine, I'd say. That's nice, dear. Stability is so important. Stability. As if I was clinging to some middle management position out of necessity rather than choice. Victoria would talk about their family vacation to the Amalfi Coast, casually mentioning the $15,000 a week villa, the private chef, the yacht day trip. Caroline would sigh wistfully and say, someday, when we can afford it. I'd nod along, complicit in my own erasure. Yes, someday, when we can afford it. Not that I could book that exact villa right now and barely notice the charge. The invisibility was my choice now, and that made it worse somehow. I was choosing to stay hidden, choosing to let them underestimate me. But why? Pride maybe, spite, or something deeper. A need to know if Caroline could love me without knowing what I was worth. A need to see if her family would ever treat me like a person without the leverage of wealth. The answer was becoming clearer every week. I started taking long walks after work. Sometimes I'd walk for hours, wandering through Capitol Hill and Queen Anne, watching people live their lives. Couples holding hands, families laughing over dinner through restaurant windows, strangers who saw each other, really saw each other, without the fog of contempt or indifference. I thought about divorce. Of course I did. Any rational person would have left by year 3. But there was something in me, some stubborn, self-destructive part, that wanted to see how far it would go, how completely I could disappear before someone noticed. My mother noticed. I visited her one Saturday afternoon, bringing groceries and a new mystery novel she'd mentioned wanting to read. She made tea, chamomile, the way she'd made it when I was a child, and we sat in her small living room, the autumn light filtering through lace curtains. You look tired, she said. I'm fine, Mom. Daniel. She fixed me with that look, the one that had extracted confessions from me as a teenager. I didn't raise a liar, I laughed. Hollow. I'm not lying, just, it's been a long week. How's Caroline? There it was, the question I'd been avoiding. She's fine, busy with work. And you two? You're happy? The word happy hung in the air between us, absurd and foreign. We're managing, I said finally. My mother set down her teacup. You deserve more than managing, sweetheart. It's complicated. Love isn't supposed to be this complicated. Maybe love changes. I said, maybe this is just what happens after 7 years. The shine wears off. Reality sets in. Reality, my mother repeated, skeptical. Is reality her family treating you like you're invisible? Is reality you coming home to someone who doesn't see you? I didn't answer. Couldn't answer. She reached across the coffee table and took my hand, her grip surprisingly strong for someone who'd been so recently sick. Daniel, listen to me. I'm your mother and I will always want you to be happy. But I can't make you choose happiness. Only you can do that. And if staying in this marriage is making you invisible to yourself, then it's time to ask why you're staying. Because I love her, I said quietly. Do you? Or do you love the idea of who she used to be, who you hoped she'd be? I didn't have an answer. I still don't. Year 8 of our marriage, my net worth crossed 75 million. I'd made strategic angel investments in 3 startups, 2 of which had been acquired at significant multiples. I'd purchased a small portfolio of rental properties in up-and-coming Seattle neighborhoods, generating passive income I didn't need but collected anyway. My investment accounts grew steadily, compounding returns building on compounding returns. I was wealthy, truly, undeniably, generationally wealthy, and I was more invisible than ever. Caroline had been promoted to senior director at her agency. She was thriving. Her calendar was packed with client meetings, conferences, networking events. She traveled twice a month, New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, staying in boutique hotels and eating at restaurants I recognized from food magazines. She never invited me along, never even mentioned the trips until the night before she left. Oh, by the way, I'm flying to LA tomorrow for the Mercer pitch, she'd say, packing her carry-on with expensive athleisure and designer makeup. Okay, how long? 3 days, 4 maybe, there's leftovers in the fridge. And she'd be gone, leaving behind only the faint scent of her perfume and the echo of a relationship that existed only on paper. At Sunday dinners, the pattern continued. Robert would hold forth. Victoria would impress. Caroline would engage. I would fade into the wallpaper, passing dishes and refilling water glasses like a particularly forgettable waiter. But something was shifting in me. A hardness. A clarity. I stopped trying to contribute to conversations. Stopped trying to prove myself. Stopped caring if they noticed me at all. I'd sit there eating Patricia's overpriced organic vegetables and mentally calculate how many shares of Apple I'd purchased that week, how much closer I was to 100 million, how little any of their approval meant in the face of what I'd built. The anger had burned out somewhere along the way, replaced by something colder. Detachment, maybe. The kind of clarity that comes when you finally stop fighting a battle you were never going to win. I started preparing, not for divorce, not yet, but for revelation. For the moment when I would make myself visible on my own terms, when I would step out of the shadows I'd been inhabiting and show them exactly who I was. I consolidated my accounts, organized my documents, ensured everything was legally airtight. I moved assets into trusts, established legal structures that would protect what I'd built. I consulted with lawyers, accountants, tax specialists. I built a fortress not just of wealth, but of paper and law and unassailable fact. If this marriage ended, when it ended, I would be prepared. But I wasn't ready yet. There was something I needed first. Some final proof. Some ultimate confirmation of what I already knew but couldn't quite accept. That Caroline and her family would never see me as anything other than what they decided I was on that first night in Medina 8 years ago. Less than. Other. Forgettable. I needed them to show me one more time at exactly who they were. And I needed to see myself, really see myself, making the choice to walk away. The invitation came in October, Thanksgiving at the Ashford estate, as always. We hope you and Caroline can join us, Patricia wrote in her elegant script on expensive cardstock. It's so important to gather family during the holidays. Family. The word was laughable. Caroline RSVP'd for both of us, without asking. Of course we're going, she said when I questioned it. It's Thanksgiving. Right, I said. Of course. I'd been thinking about this moment for months, maybe years. The perfect stage for my exit, the perfect audience. A family gathering, everyone assembled, everyone comfortable in their assumptions about the world and their place in it. And me, the invisible man, finally stepping into the light. I'd crossed 100 million in net worth that October. The late-stage startup I'd invested in had gone public, and my shares had vested at a valuation that pushed my portfolio past the threshold. $100 million. After taxes, fees, expenses, still 100 million. It wasn't the money that mattered. It was the proof. The undeniable, unambiguous proof that I had built something extraordinary while they all looked through me. In the weeks leading up to Thanksgiving, I finalized everything. Met with my lawyer to review post-nuptial options. None, since we'd never signed a prenup and Washington is a community property state. Caroline would be entitled to half of anything earned during the marriage, which meant roughly $20 million, a sum I'd accepted with a cold calculation. Met with my wealth manager to ensure liquidity. Met with a therapist, actually, for the first time in my life, to talk through what I was about to do. What are you hoping to achieve? Dr. Sarah Chen asked during our third session. She was mid-40s, sharp-eyed, the kind of person who listened more than she spoke. I want them to see me, I said. And then what? I don't know. I just know I can't keep living like this. Like I don't exist. You exist, regardless of whether they acknowledge you, she said gently. You know that, right? Intellectually, yes, but emotionally? I shook my head. I need to know I can walk away. I need to prove to myself that I'm worth more than their dismissal. And revealing your wealth will prove that. It'll force them to confront who I actually am, what I've actually accomplished. It'll make them see what they missed while they were busy looking through me. Dr. Chen leaned back in her chair, studying me. Daniel, I want you to consider something. Revealing your wealth won't change who they are. It won't make them suddenly respect you. It might shock them. It might make them reevaluate their assumptions. But the people who've spent 8 years treating you as invisible, they'll find a way to rationalize it, to minimize it, to make it fit their existing narrative about who you are. Maybe, I said, but at least I'll know I told the truth. At least I'll know I stopped hiding. Is that what you've been doing? Hiding or protecting yourself? I didn't have an answer. There's a difference, she continued, between strategic privacy and self-erasure. You built something remarkable. You have every right to keep that private. But if the privacy is costing you your sense of self, if you're disappearing into your own silence, then yes, maybe it's time to speak up. Just be clear about what you're trying to achieve, and be prepared for the fact that their reaction might not give you what you're hoping for. I nodded, I understood, but understanding and accepting are different things. I scheduled another appointment for the week after Thanksgiving. The night before Thanksgiving, Caroline came home late from drinks with colleagues. She was tipsy, cheerful, in a way I hadn't seen in months. She kicked off her heels and collapsed on the couch next to me, smelling like wine and expensive perfume. God, I needed that, she said, stretching. Work has been insane, yeah? The Mercer campaign launched today. It's performing even better than projected. Roger said it might be our biggest win of the year. She turned to look at me, actually look at me, for the first time in weeks. How was your day? The question was so unexpected, so rare, that I almost didn't know how to answer. It was fine, quiet. That's good. She patted my leg absently, then picked up her phone, the moment already passing. I watched her scroll through Instagram, double-tapping photos of other people's lives, and thought, this is the last time I'll sit next to you like this. The last time I'll pretend this is enough. Tomorrow, everything changes. Caroline, I said. Do you ever think about us? About whether we're happy? She looked up, confused by the question. What do you mean? I mean, are you happy in this marriage? She frowned, a small crease forming between her eyebrows. Where is this coming from? Did something happen? No, I'm just asking. She set her phone down, turning her body toward me with the kind of focused attention people give to crisis situations. Daniel, if you're feeling insecure about something, I'm not feeling insecure. Then we should talk about it. But I'm really tired tonight, and we have Thanksgiving tomorrow, so can this wait? Could it wait? Yes. It had waited 8 years. Another day wouldn't matter. Sure, I said. It can wait. She smiled, relieved, and kissed my cheek. Thank you. I promise we'll talk soon. Really talk. Things have just been so crazy with work. She went to bed shortly after, leaving me alone in the living room, the television flickering its blue light across empty space. I stayed up until 2 in the morning, sitting in the dark, preparing myself for what I was about to do. Not rehearsing lines, this wasn't a performance, but centering myself, remembering who I was, what I'd built, why I'd built it. When I finally went to bed, Caroline was asleep, curled on her side of the mattress, a wall of pillows between us. I lay there staring at the ceiling and waited for morning. We arrived at the Ashford estate at 4 in the afternoon, right on schedule. The driveway was full of cars, Victoria and James's Range Rover, Robert's Mercedes, Patricia's Lexus, plus a few others I didn't recognize. Extended family, probably. Cousins, in-laws, more witnesses to my invisibility. Caroline had insisted we bring wine, something expensive from a boutique vineyard in Walla Walla. I carried it up the front steps while she checked her makeup in her phone's camera. Patricia answered the door, wearing a cashmere twin set and pearls. Oh, wonderful, you're here. She air-kissed Caroline, then glanced at me. Hello, Daniel. Patricia, happy Thanksgiving. Yes, yes, lovely. Come in, come in. Everyone's in the living room. The house smelled like roasted turkey and expensive candles. Classical music played softly from hidden speakers. Everything was perfect, curated, designed to convey effortless grace. In the living room, the family was assembled. Robert in his leather armchair, holding court. Victoria and James on the sofa, James looking mildly uncomfortable in a sweater that probably cost $500. A few other relatives I'd met maybe twice. Patricia's sister Margaret, Victoria's husband's brother Tim, some others whose names I'd never bothered to learn because they'd never bothered to learn mine. Caroline, Victoria stood and embraced her sister. God, you look amazing. Is that the new Reformation dress? Just got it. I couldn't resist. They fell into conversation about fashion and sales and some influencer I'd never heard of. I stood awkwardly holding the wine until Patricia took it from me with a vague thank you and disappeared toward the kitchen. Robert called out from his chair. David, good to see you. How's the tech world treating you? It's Daniel, sir, and it's treating me fine. I'm glad to hear it, glad to hear it. He'd already turned back to his previous conversation, something about municipal bonds. I found a spot near the window and stood there, watching the family interact. They moved around each other with the ease of people who'd always belonged, who'd never questioned their place in the world. Caroline was radiant, laughing at something Victoria said, her whole body animated in a way I rarely saw at home. She belonged here. I never had. James approached, handed me a beer. Hanging in there? He asked quietly. Always. He grimaced sympathetically. Yeah, these gatherings can be a lot. James was decent, actually. He'd always been polite to me, at least. Probably because he understood what it was like to marry into the Ashford orbit, to constantly orbit a sun that never quite warmed you. How's work? I asked. Busy, too busy. I'm doing 3 heart surgeries a week now, plus research, plus teaching residents. He shook his head. Sometimes I think about what it would be like to just have a normal job. You know, 9 to 5, leave work at work. I almost laughed. Grass is always greener. I suppose, still, at least you get to go home at 5, and forget about code. I go home and still see patients in my sleep. Before I could respond, Patricia called everyone to dinner. The dining table was set for 12. Fine china, crystal glasses, silver flatware that probably cost more than my first car. Candles flickered down the center, surrounded by an elaborate arrangement of autumn flowers and small pumpkins that looked like they'd been imported from a Pinterest board. I ended up seated between Patricia's sister Margaret, a chatty woman in her 60s who asked intrusive questions about when Caroline and I were planning to have children, and the empty chair where Caroline eventually sat after finishing a conversation with her father. Robert sat at the head of the table, of course, Patricia at the foot, Victoria and James across from us. The others filled in the gaps. Patricia's chef had prepared a feast: heritage turkey with herb butter, truffle mashed potatoes, roasted Brussels sprouts with bacon, cranberry relish with orange zest, 3 types of stuffing, maple glazed carrots, fresh baked rolls. Everything was plated beautifully, garnished perfectly, photographed by multiple family members before anyone took a bite. Robert stood to give a toast. Family, he began, his voice carrying the authority of a man accustomed to being heard. I am grateful, as always, for this time together, for the blessings we've received this year, for health, prosperity, and the continued success of our family's endeavors. He raised his glass. To family. To family. Everyone echoed. I lifted my glass but didn't drink. Conversation flowed around me. Victoria talked about James's latest published research paper. Patricia discussed the upcoming gala season. Margaret asked Caroline about work, and Caroline launched into an enthusiastic recap of her recent campaigns, her professional victories, her rising star at the agency. We're thinking about promoting her to VP next year, someone mentioned. Caroline's boss wasn't present, but apparently everyone knew about her career trajectory except me. That's wonderful, honey, Patricia cooed. You've worked so hard. It's about time, Victoria added. You've been carrying that agency for years. Caroline beamed, soaking in the praise, the validation, the visibility. I pushed Brussels sprouts around my plate and said nothing. Robert turned to James. And how's the hospital treating you? Still planning that expansion to the cardiology wing? James launched into a detailed explanation of hospital politics and funding challenges. Everyone listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions, nodding along. When he finished, there was a natural lull, the kind of lull where someone else might speak up, share their own news, contribute to the conversation. I could feel it, the opportunity, the opening. My heart was pounding. Dr. Chen's voice echoed in my mind. Be clear about what you're trying to achieve. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I wasn't trying to gloat. I was simply trying to exist, to be seen, to stop pretending that my invisibility was acceptable. I set down my fork. I have some news to share, I said. The table didn't quiet immediately. A few people kept talking. Caroline glanced at me with mild surprise, like a dog that had just noticed a piece of furniture had moved. Daniel has news, Patricia said brightly, with that patronizing encouragement you'd give a child at show and tell. Now they were listening, sort of, with polite, expectant faces that suggested they were prepared for me to announce something mundane. A promotion, maybe, a new project at work, something appropriate for my station. I took a breath. I've been working on some projects outside my day job, building software platforms, making investments, and I wanted you all to know that I've been pretty successful. Caroline frowned slightly. What do you mean, successful? I mean, I've built and sold 2 companies, made some strategic investments, built a portfolio. Victoria laughed, not unkindly but dismissively. That's wonderful. No, Daniel, it's so great that you have hobbies. It's not a hobby, I said calmly. It's my business. And as of last month, my net worth crossed $160 million. Silence. Complete, total, suffocating silence. The kind of silence where you can hear the candles crackling, hear someone's breathing, hear the very air holding still. Victoria's jaw literally dropped. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again like a fish. She looked at James, then back at me, then at Caroline. Robert had frozen mid-reach for the wine bottle. Patricia's eyes were wide, her polite smile locked in place like a mask that had forgotten how to move. Caroline just stared. Her face was blank, completely blank, as if her brain had blue screened trying to process the words. Margaret broke the silence first. Did you say 160 million? Give or take, I said, my voice steady. The markets fluctuate, obviously. You're joking, Victoria said finally. This is some kind of joke. It's not a joke. I built a supply chain management platform, sold it to a private equity firm for 65 million plus earnouts. Before that, I sold a smaller e-commerce optimization tool for 2 million. I've made strategic angel investments in 3 startups, 2 of which have been acquired. I own a portfolio of rental properties across Seattle, and I've been investing conservatively for the past 8 years, compounding returns. 160 million. That's the current figure. Robert found his voice. That's not possible. You work at a tech company. You're a mid-level engineer. I'm a senior director of engineering, actually, but you're right. That's not where the money came from. The money came from the businesses I built in my spare time, the businesses I built while no one was paying attention. Caroline's voice came out strangled. What businesses? You never told me about any businesses. No, I agreed, and I didn't. But why? Why wouldn't you tell me? I looked at her, really looked at her, maybe for the first time in years. Because you never asked. Because you never wondered what I did when you were too busy with work or your family or anything else that mattered more than I did. Because I built something extraordinary and I wanted to see if anyone would notice, if anyone would see me. That's not fair, Caroline said, her voice rising. You can't just hide this from me. We're married, so we're supposed to share things. Share things, I repeated. Like how you've shared your promotion plans, your business trips, your entire life that doesn't include me except as an afterthought. Daniel, Patricia interjected, her voice trembling slightly, this is all very surprising, but there's no need to be hostile. I'm not being hostile. I'm being honest. For the first time in 8 years, I'm being completely honest. Robert had regained some of his composure. If what you're saying is true, and I'll need to see documentation, obviously, I said dryly, then this changes things. Financially speaking, if you're married, Caroline is entitled to half of any marital assets. I'm aware of Washington's community property laws, Robert. I've spoken extensively with lawyers. And bonus, anything I built or earned during the marriage is jointly owned, which means Caroline is entitled to approximately $80 million should we divorce. I've made peace with that. Should we divorce? Caroline's voice cracked. Are you saying you want a divorce? Everyone was staring at me now, really staring. For the first time in 8 years, I was the center of attention, visible, undeniable, and all I felt was tired. I don't know what I want, I said quietly. I just know I can't keep being invisible. I can't keep pretending that this, I gestured around the table, is family. That any of you see me as anything other than an inconvenience, a disappointing footnote in Caroline's otherwise impressive life. That's not true, Caroline whispered. Isn't it? When's the last time you asked me about my day? When's the last time you looked at me, actually looked at me, and saw a person you loved? When's the last time any of you remembered my name without needing to be reminded? Robert's face had gone red. Now you listen here, young man. I'm not young, and I'm not your employee, and I'm done listening. I stood, carefully folding my napkin and placing it beside my plate. Thank you for dinner, Patricia. As always, it was beautifully prepared. Daniel, wait. Caroline reached for my arm. I stepped back gently but firmly. I'll be at the Fairmont downtown. When you're ready to talk, really talk, you know how to reach me. I walked out of that dining room, through the living room with its tasteful furniture and expensive art, out the front door into the cold November evening. Behind me, I could hear voices rising. Caroline calling my name. Victoria saying something sharp. Robert's low, rumbling anger. I got in my Honda Civic, started the engine, and drove away from the Ashford estate for what I knew might be the last time. My hands didn't start shaking until I was halfway to the hotel. The Fairmont was expensive and anonymous, exactly what I needed. I checked into a suite overlooking Elliott Bay, ordered room service, a burger and fries, nothing fancy, and sat by the window watching ferries cross the dark water. My phone started ringing around 8. Caroline first, then Victoria, then Caroline again, then a number I didn't recognize that I suspected was Patricia or Robert. I let them all go to voicemail. Around 10, I finally listened to Caroline's messages. The first was angry. What the hell, Daniel? You just embarrassed me in front of my entire family. You owe me an explanation. Call me back right now. The second was confused. I don't understand why you'd hide this from me. We're supposed to be partners. How could you not tell me? The third was desperate. Please, just talk to me. I know things haven't been perfect, but we can fix this. We can figure this out. Please come home. The fourth was calculating. We need to discuss the financial implications of this. I've spoken to a lawyer friend of mine, and she says I deleted the rest without listening. There was one voicemail from an unknown number. I almost deleted it, but something made me listen. Robert's voice, stiff and formal. Daniel, we need to have a conversation about your revelation tonight. There are legal matters to discuss, financial arrangements to consider. Please call me at your earliest convenience. I deleted that too. The only call I returned was to my mother. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm and slightly sleepy. Daniel, it's late, sweetheart. Is everything okay? Yeah, Mom, I'm fine. I needed to hear your voice. What happened? I told her everything. The dinner, the revelation, Caroline's reaction, the drive to the hotel. She listened without interrupting, the way she always had, giving me space to empty out the chaos in my head. When I finished, there was a long pause. How do you feel? She asked finally. I don't know. Relieved, terrified, free? All of those sound about right. I could hear the smile in her voice. Daniel, I want you to know something. I'm so proud of you. Not for the money, though. My God, honey. $160 million, but for finally standing up for yourself. For refusing to disappear. I probably could have done it more gracefully. Grace is overrated. Sometimes the truth needs to be said plainly, even if it's uncomfortable. What do I do now? You rest, you breathe. You give yourself permission to feel whatever you're feeling. And then, when you're ready, you decide what kind of life you want to build. With or without Caroline. With or without the Ashfords. You get to choose, Daniel. Maybe for the first time in years, you actually get to choose. We talked for another hour about nothing and everything, about her garden, her book club, her plans for Christmas, normal things, human things, the kind of conversation I'd been starving for without realizing it. When we hung up, I felt lighter, not happy exactly, but unburdened. I slept better that night than I had in years. Caroline showed up at the hotel the next morning. I'd just finished breakfast, room service again, scrambled eggs and coffee, when there was a knock at the door. I looked through the peephole and saw her standing in the hallway, wearing yesterday's dress, her makeup smudged, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked exhausted, lost. I opened the door. "Hi," she said quietly. "Hi. Can I come in?" I stepped aside, letting her enter. She walked to the window, stood looking out at the view, her arms wrapped around herself like she was cold. "I didn't sleep last night," she said. "I just kept thinking about what you said, trying to understand how I missed this. How you could build this entire life and I didn't even notice." I didn't respond. There wasn't much to say. She turned to face me, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry. God, Daniel, I'm so sorry. You're right. About everything. I stopped seeing you. I stopped treating you like you mattered. I got so caught up in my own life, my own world, that I forgot we were supposed to be partners." "Yeah," I said, "you did. Can you forgive me?" The question hung between us. Could I forgive her? Maybe, eventually, but forgiveness and reconciliation are different things. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I don't know if sorry is enough. I don't know if we can fix 8 years of me disappearing and you not noticing. We could try. We could go to counseling. We could start over. Start over as what? As equals? As partners? Or as the rich guy and the woman who married him before she knew he was rich?" She flinched. "That's not fair, isn't it? Caroline, your first voicemail was about how I embarrassed you. Your fourth was about legal implications and dividing assets. You didn't ask if I was okay. You didn't ask why I felt the need to hide this from you. You went straight to how this affected you and what you're entitled to." I was shocked. I didn't know how to process. I've been shocked for 8 years. Shocked every time your father called me the wrong name. Shocked every time your family talked over me like I was a piece of furniture. Shocked every time you chose work or your friends or your family over me. Shocked every time I reached for you in bed and you pulled away. And you know what? I processed it. I dealt with it. I built something meaningful while you all assumed I was just existing. She was crying harder now, her shoulders shaking. "I was a terrible wife. I know that. I don't know how it happened, how I turned into someone who could treat you like that. But I want to change. I want to be better." "Do you, or do you want to be married to a man worth $160 million? That's not—" She stopped, wiped her face. "Okay, maybe that's part of it. I'm not going to lie. The money changes things. It changes how I see you, how everyone sees you. And I hate that it does, but it does." At least she was being honest. "So what do you want, Caroline?" She took a shaky breath. "I want to try. I want to go to therapy. I want to rebuild what we lost. I want to prove to you that I can be the partner you deserve. And if I don't want to try, if I'm done," fresh tears, "then I'll accept that. I'll sign whatever papers you want. I'll take my half and go. But I'm asking, begging for a chance to fix this. Not for the money, for us. For the people we used to be before everything went wrong." I looked at her standing there, broken and desperate and real in a way I hadn't seen in years. Part of me wanted to believe her. Wanted to believe that love could be resurrected from the grave we dug for it. Wanted to believe that visibility, once lost, could be regained. But a larger part of me, the part that had learned to survive in silence, to build empires in the margins, knew better. "I'll think about it," I said. "But I need time, real time. I need to figure out who I am outside of being invisible." She nodded, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "How much time?" "I don't know. Months, maybe. I'm going to stay here for a while. Maybe travel. I've spent 8 years in one place, invisible to everyone, including myself. I need to move, to see what else is out there." "Can I call you?" "Yes, but I might not answer." "Fair enough." She moved toward the door, then stopped. "Daniel, for what it's worth, I'm proud of you, what you built, who you are. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. Yeah, I said. Me too. She left quietly, and I was alone again. Alone, but no longer invisible. I stayed at the Fairmont for a week, ordering room service and working through the backlog of messages from family, friends, colleagues who'd somehow heard about Thanksgiving dinner. Apparently, Victoria had told someone who told someone else, and now everyone in the Ashfords' social circle knew that the forgettable husband had been hiding a fortune. The attention was surreal. Suddenly, I was receiving LinkedIn requests from people I'd never met, invitations to investment opportunities, emails from wealth managers offering their services, text messages from acquaintances I hadn't spoken to in years, congratulating me on my success. Everyone wanted to be seen with the newly visible man. I ignored most of it. What I didn't ignore was the meeting request from Robert. Subject line, family business opportunity. I agreed to meet him for coffee, mostly out of morbid curiosity. We met at a cafe in Pioneer Square, neutral territory. He arrived exactly on time, wearing a suit despite it being Saturday morning, looking every inch the real estate mogul. Daniel, he said, extending his hand, thank you for meeting me. Robert, we sat. He ordered a triple espresso. I ordered tea. I'll be direct, he said once the server left. I owe you an apology. We all do. We underestimated you, and that was wrong. You're clearly a man of extraordinary capability, and I failed to see that. Okay, he blinked, perhaps expecting more of a response. I'd like to make amends. I'd like to discuss potential business opportunities. Your background in tech, combined with my experience in real estate and development, there could be synergies worth exploring. Of course, now that I was visible, now that I had value, suddenly I was worth partnering with. I'm not interested, I said simply. You haven't even heard the proposal. I don't need to. Robert, you spent 8 years treating me like I was an inconvenience. You couldn't remember my name. You didn't ask me a single meaningful question about my life, my work, my thoughts. And now, because I have money, you want to be business partners? I understand your frustration. I don't think you do. You're offering me visibility now because I have something you want. But I didn't need visibility from you. I needed respect, basic human respect. And you never gave me that. His jaw tightened. I'm trying to make things right. By offering me a business deal? That's not making things right. That's opportunism. What do you want from me then? An apology? Fine, I apologize. We treated you poorly, but we can't change the past. We can only move forward. You're right, I said, standing. We can't change the past, which is why I don't see a future where we do business together, or where we're family, really. I appreciate the coffee, but I'm done with the Ashfords. I left him sitting there, his expensive espresso cooling in front of him, probably trying to calculate what he'd lost by underestimating the wrong person. It felt good. Really, genuinely good. I met with Victoria, too, at her insistence. She came to the hotel, bringing her daughter, my niece, technically, though I'd spent maybe 10 cumulative hours with her over the years. Uncle Daniel. Emma ran to me, 7 years old and oblivious to the family drama. Mommy says you're rich now. Emma, honey, that's not... Victoria's face flushed. We don't talk about money like that. I laughed despite myself. It's okay. Yeah, Emma, I guess I am. Does that mean you'll buy me a pony? Emma! Maybe someday, I told her, then looked at Victoria. What can I do for you? Victoria sat, smoothing her designer dress. I wanted to apologize. James made me realize how terrible I've been to you. How terrible we all were. James seems like a good guy. He is. He's been married into this family for 6 years, and he said he understood exactly how you felt. Being dismissed, being invisible. He said he's felt it too, though he's better at hiding it than you were. I wasn't hiding anything. You all just weren't looking. She nodded, accepting that. You're right, and I'm sorry. I spent so long assuming you were less than, assuming you didn't matter, and I was wrong. You were. Is there anything I can do to make amends? I thought about it. Yeah, treat people better. Don't measure someone's worth by their bank account or their job title or whether they fit into your social circle. Treat them like they matter. Because they do. That's what you can do. She nodded slowly to, I'll try. Good. Emma was playing with a toy on the floor, oblivious to the adult conversation. Victoria watched her for a moment, then looked back at me. Are you going to divorce Caroline? I don't know yet. She's devastated, you know. She really does love you. Maybe. But love isn't enough if it's conditional. If she only sees me now because I have money, that's not love. That's just recognition of value. That's harsh. It's true. Victoria stood, gathering Emma's things. For what it's worth, I hope you figure it out. Whatever you decide, I hope you find happiness. Thanks, I said, and I meant it. I left Seattle in December. I'd wrapped up loose ends, talked to my lawyer about separation agreements, talked to my wealth manager about asset protection, talked to my boss about taking a leave of absence. I packed a single suitcase and booked a one-way ticket to Tokyo. Why Tokyo? Why not? I'd never been. I'd never been anywhere, really. 8 years of marriage to a woman whose family owned vacation homes in Cabo and Aspen, and I'd never left the Pacific Northwest except for work conferences. I was going to be visible to myself, even if no one else was watching. Caroline called the night before my flight. You're really leaving? Yeah. For how long? I don't know. 6 months, a year, however long it takes. However long it takes to what? To figure out who I am when I'm not trying to prove myself to people who don't see me. She was quiet for a long moment. I see you now. Do you? Or do you see the net worth, the accomplishments, the proof that you didn't marry down after all? That's not fair. Maybe not. But it's honest. Another pause. I've started therapy, real therapy, twice a week. I'm working on understanding that how I became someone who could treat her husband like that. Someone who could value her family's opinion more than her partner's humanity. That's good, Caroline. I mean that. I hope it helps you. It's helping me realize that I don't know who I am without external validation, without my family's approval, without my career achievements. I built my entire identity on being successful, being admired, being enough. And I made you invisible because you didn't fit into that narrative? Because loving you, the real you, would have required me to challenge everything my family believed about worth and value. And I was too weak to do that. I was surprised by her honesty, surprised by the clarity. I'm sorry, she continued. Not for what it gets me, not because I want you to come back. Just, I'm sorry for all of it. You deserved better. Yeah, I said, I did. Will you come back, eventually? I don't know, maybe, but not as your husband. Not as the invisible man who pays half the mortgage and passes the dinner rolls. If I come back, it'll be as someone who doesn't need your family's approval. Someone who doesn't need your approval. Someone who exists, regardless of whether anyone's looking. I understand. Do you? I'm starting to. We talked for another hour about therapy and growth and the version of ourselves we'd lost somewhere along the way. It was the most honest conversation we'd had in years, maybe ever. When we hung up, I felt something shift. Not forgiveness, exactly, not reconciliation, but closure. The kind of closure that comes from finally being seen, even if that scene comes too late to save what was broken. I spent 4 months in Tokyo, then 3 in Vietnam, then 2 in Greece. I traveled alone, ate alone, walked through foreign cities where no one knew my name or my net worth or anything, except that I was a tall American with a decent camera and a tendency to tip well. I was invisible again, but differently. I was invisible by choice, anonymous, free. I took a photography course in Hanoi, learned to make pottery in Kyoto, volunteered at an animal shelter in Santorini. I did things that had nothing to do with building wealth or proving worth or being seen by people who mattered. I just existed, and it was enough. My mother visited me in Athens in June. She'd never been to Europe, never traveled much at all, and watching her stand in front of the Parthenon, tears in her eyes, was worth every dollar I'd ever made. Thank you, she whispered, for bringing me here, for showing me the world. Thank you, I said, for showing me how to survive it. We spent 2 weeks together and eating Greek food, walking ancient streets, talking about everything and nothing. She asked about Caroline once. Have you decided? Not yet, but I'm getting close. What's your heart telling you? That I can't go back to being invisible? That I'd rather be alone than disappear? She nodded, understanding. Then you have your answer. I came back to Seattle in September, nearly a year after Thanksgiving. The city looked the same, felt the same, but I was different, calmer, clearer, whole in a way I hadn't been before. I'd made my decision. I met Caroline at a cafe in Capitol Hill, the same one where we'd had our first date 11 years earlier. She looked good, healthier somehow, less frantic, like she'd been doing the same work I'd been doing, just from a different location. Hi, she said, standing when I arrived. Hi. We sat, ordered coffee, made small talk about my travels, her work, the weather. Then, quietly, I've filed the papers for divorce. She nodded like she'd been expecting it. Okay, I'm sorry. Don't be, you were right. About everything. We can't fix 8 years of me not seeing you. We can't go back and build a foundation that was never there. And you deserve someone who sees you from the beginning, not just after you prove yourself. You've changed, I observed. So have you. She smiled sadly. Maybe if we'd both been these versions of ourselves from the start, things would have been different. Maybe. We talked through the logistics. The lawyers had already worked out most of it. She'd get 40 million, half of what I'd built during our marriage. The condo would be sold, proceeds split, clean break as clean as it could be. What are you going to do? She asked. Travel more, probably. Work on new projects. Figure out what makes me happy without needing to prove anything to anyone. That sounds good. Really good. What about you? I'm moving to Portland, starting over. My therapist thinks it's important to build an identity separate from my family, from Seattle, from all the expectations I've been carrying. I'm scared, but excited too. Good for you. We finished our coffee in comfortable silence. When we stood to leave, she hugged me, really hugged me. The kind of hug that acknowledges an ending and releases it with grace. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For refusing to stay invisible, for teaching me that love without respect isn't love at all, for being brave enough to walk away. You're welcome. We left separately, walking in different directions toward different futures. It felt right. It's been 3 years since that Thanksgiving. I'm 43 now. I live in a small apartment in San Francisco, nothing fancy, with a view of the bay and a coffee shop on the corner where everyone knows my order but not my net worth. I work on projects that interest me, some for profit, some just for the challenge. I've started mentoring young engineers, particularly those from backgrounds like mine, teaching them that worth isn't measured in bank accounts, but in what you build and how you treat people. My mother is healthy, thriving. We travel together twice a year, exploring places she'd only dreamed of. She's currently planning a trip to New Zealand for next spring. Caroline and I are cordial. We text occasionally, updating each other on major life events with the kind of friendly distance that comes from having once shared a life and then consciously choosing to build separate ones. She's doing well, I think, dating someone who actually sees her, not just her accomplishments, learning to be enough without external validation. I'm dating too, casually. No one's serious yet. I'm in no rush. I spent so long being invisible that I'm still learning how to be seen without armor, how to let someone in without losing myself. The Ashfords and I have no contact. I heard Robert had a health scare last year, and I felt something, not quite sympathy, but a kind of distant human concern. I sent flowers. He sent a card thanking David. Some things never change. Last month, I was interviewed for a tech magazine about successful exits and post-acquisition life. The interviewer asked what advice I'd give to other entrepreneurs. Build something that matters to you, I said. Not something that proves your worth to people who won't see you anyway. Build it because it's interesting, because it's challenging, because it makes the world slightly better. And surround yourself with people who see you, really see you, regardless of what you've built or what you're worth. That's good advice, Noah, the interviewer said. It's hard-earned, I replied. I think about that Thanksgiving dinner sometimes, about the moment when I finally spoke up, when I refused to stay invisible for even one more second, about the shock on their faces, the silence that followed, the way everything changed, and nothing changed all at once. They saw my net worth. They saw my accomplishments. They saw the proof of my value rendered in dollars and cents. But they never really saw me. And that's okay now. I've learned that visibility isn't something granted by others. It's something you claim for yourself. It's the decision to stop apologizing for existing, to stop shrinking to fit into spaces that were never meant for you, to stop waiting for permission to be enough. I'm enough. I was always enough. I'm worth $160 million, give or take, but that's not what makes me visible. What makes me visible is that I finally see myself, and I refuse to disappear again, no matter who's looking or who's not. That's the story. The story of how I went from invisible to visible, from dismissed to undeniable, from ghost to man. Not because I proved my worth to people who didn't value me, but because I finally proved it to myself. And that, I've learned, is the only visibility that ever really mattered.